everybody. This is Principal Anderson. I know it looks like I have the same outfit on from last week, but I really don't. I changed. It's just an optical illusion. But today we are still celebrating Women's History Month because it is still March. And I am surrounded by mathematicians, those that can go beyond 2 plus 2 and the Pythagorean theory and Pythagorean theory
theorem
and theorem. Yeah, see already. So that is history within itself because for so long it has been like men thought they were the only ones that knew math, and so for me now to be here with them, I'm totally excited. So what I'm gonna do is let them go around and introduce themselves and say something about math, and then we're gonna kind of get into women in math and history. So we'll start with you, Miss Bryant.
Cool. So, first name?
However you want to do it.
Okay, so I'm Rosetta Bryant. I've been teaching for 18 years. All math. Math is life.
Mm-hmm. Dang. Yeah. I'm Amanda Fetter. I have been teaching for 16 years, and I have always done special education math, high school special education math. So that's been my jam.
My name is Hannah Meyer. This is my 3rd year teaching math. I kind of fell into it. Loved math in high school. We had a struggle in college, me and math, but I'm loving the way that it's going and like being able to give these kids their like aha moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you said loved math in high school. Yeah. So in high school, I thought I was the bomb. So I'm going to be an accountant, and we had the vocational thing. So I went as accountant, went to college. I'm going to be an accountant, and I think like after like the 3rd year, I was like, I got to do what with numbers, and I was like, no way. And so I changed majors, right? So, like, what has kept you guys so intrigued in math? Like,
it's funny you say that because I was the complete opposite. Though I graduated with 6 years of math from high school, my dream was to be one of the star, like, psychologists on the Ricky Lake show.
Like Dr. Phil with Oprah. Yeah.
So, they have dual credit now, but it was called Upward Bound when I was in high school. So I went to DePaul, took a psych course, hated it. Took math, excelled, naturally. I was like, well, I'm going to UIC anyway, so maybe I'll like it there. Took a couple psych courses there, hated it. But I found that I kept taking a math course because those were the easy courses for me to take. And in order for me to keep maintain a high GPA, I always kept one of those classes on my schedule.
Wow.
So I could have a high GPA. And 2-3 years down the line, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to be on anybody's talk show because I hate these classes. I've always struggled writing papers. And I ended up taking like a survey at student services, and it was like teaching. But I was like, teach what? I don't like kids. Well, I like kids, but I didn't want to be a teacher
at your time,
because of my experience in high school.
Yeah.
So I looked at my transcript, and it was all these math classes. And I was like, let's do math. And that's how I ended up
Wow.
teaching math.
What about you, Miss Fetter?
So math has always come more easily to me. I have learning disabilities, and so for me, math is just very like logical, straightforward, right and wrong. There's steps that I can follow. It's concrete information. Even when it's abstract, like you're needing to find like what a letter is in a math problem, right? It's still like the steps to get there. It's just very straightforward. Like you do what you have to do. It's funny because I like high school was very hard for me because I had support. But we think about the fact that like, when I was in school, special education was still new. So like the services that I had, like, it's not what we offer at Clark at all. Like there was one
Plus
special
it had a stigma
teacher.
still, like a really
Huge
bad
stigma, like about like whether or not I was going to be taking medication or not. I had to get tutoring for reading and writing because I have comprehension processing learning disabilities. And so, just even being able to have to be out of the class, like for tutoring, that was also like, an issue. But as I was getting older, and in middle school and then in high school, I had to spend the most amount of time on English and like history homework, because those were the hardest for me. And it took me like 2 seconds to do. Like, I used to not do my math homework, get an A on the test, and then my teacher would say, well, you're going to fail the class because you didn't do any of your homework, and then spend one night just doing all the homework for it and passing. So math was always it just made me feel smart. It made me feel capable. And it was never a subject that I had to like worry about in school. I went to college to get a degree in special education. So I knew like that, I knew that that's what I was going in for. And I had to take just like a basic algebra class just for college credit. And then my math class for my major was how to teach math. Basically, like that was sort of how to break it down. It was more on an elementary level, but with special education that helps because you need to be able to break it down differently.
Absolutely.
And I realized like I enjoyed figuring out different ways. Again, it's like a puzzle, it's problem solving. I enjoyed the different ways to break down the problem and how to teach it to somebody who just is math illiterate, because I was sort of the opposite problem in school. Like I was very math literate. So that was, and then when I got my first job, I moved to Chicago. I got my first job. I was teaching at a therapeutic school, and the principal said like, okay, well, we have a math position available. And I said, great. Like, that's what I wanted to teach anyway. So I started teaching math, and, I loved it. The kids hated it because like they don't.
I think they still hate it.
Yeah.
I think y'all very seldom find a few that are like, oh, please put me in more math. Please put me in more math.
And I think that the bad thing that I think has happened in our society is that you label being good or bad at math, but the reality is you need to use math in everything that you do. Yeah. Like, so you might struggle solving linear equations. Fine, I get that, but you'll learn the skills.
Well, you'll struggle saying
Pythagorean theorem.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
all of that. But so I think that something that I've always tried to work on when my students come into me saying I'm bad at math, I just say like, you're not there yet. I say the power of yet. And like, you're not bad at it. You can do it. It's just, and it's okay if things are hard for you. Like we can do hard things. So that's sort
How
of
did you
my
get
math.
involved in this?
I never actually wanted to be a math teacher. So when I was a senior in high school, I'm the youngest of 4. My mom was like, okay, we have to figure out what your plan is going into college. Like, we're not just going to sit around and let you like lollygag, do whatever you want.
And waste money.
Yes, exactly. And I was like, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be an immigration lawyer. My grandfather's from Mexico. I've had family who's like struggled getting their like papers and everything. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And she said, okay, cool. You're not going to major in pre-law. That's not happening. So let's look at like the LSATs, who does better on those, and we'll decide like what your undergrad major should be. I'm a huge people person. I love to talk. I love to like be around people and interact and everything. And so I wanted something that was still people forward, but also something that could kind of stand on its own in case I didn't end up wanting to do law. And on the LSATs, people who use the logic half of their brain in their undergrad, so like physics majors, math majors, things of that sort, did better because so much of the LSATs are logic based. So I was like, okay, cool. My mom has been a teacher for over 30 years. I was like, I think maybe math education. I've always been good at math. And as you had said, like, this is being women in math and being a almost entirely women math team at Clark is an oddity. And so like there is a good amount of job security within that as well. So that was like all of the things that went into my head when I went into college, and I fell in love with education and I fell in love with kids and teaching, and that idea of like, you're not bad at this, you just haven't been taught it in the way that you're going to be able to learn the best. And that's the biggest thing. And I think that that's what I gained so much from in being a math teacher specifically, is like, it's not even about knowing how to solve for X or how to do this, that, and the third. It's about that like cognitive development and like you being able to have those problem solving skills and taking that into the rest of your life. And so like, no, this wasn't exactly where I thought I was going, but I love it. And I loved every second.
So here's what I hear parents say all the time, and I don't know the answer when they say it. Oh, this new math that they do, and I'm always like, it's new math, because 1 and 1 to me is still 2.
So the approach is a lot different.
Yeah.
So, well, Hannah, I know you kind of like a baby. But when I reflect back on my own experience, it was, I'm going to teach this today, and this is how you do it. Rarely ever was it ever connected to prior knowledge or
real
things
world
that we had done before.
Yeah.
Now, I'll tell you this. My son, 15, he came up through the whole Common Core era where he focused on, you know, like the concepts themselves. His mental math puts me to shame.
But do you feel like he's doing a different math, or?
Well, the way that it's laid out in front of them, the way that like the handouts are created, how the concepts are introduced, is far different.
I mean, you think about you think about life, and you think about like the way that we've kind of progressed as human beings. Like, if math stayed the same and we were still doing it the same way that like schools were first developed, like, why? Like, what would be because as we progress as societally, and like we understand more how the brain works and how we work, and we have technology also to integrate into it, like the way that we do these things are going to change. But I think also the big thing is like at the root of it all, like it's still the same. Like we're still like ultimately reaching the same goal. Maybe the steps here and there are going to be different, because again, as each person learns and grows, like you are going to learn different. The way that you're going to write this down is different. The way that this is going to work is all going to be different.
So what do you say? Because this is, I'm speaking for myself now too. What do you say to parents when they say, I can't help them with that math because that's not what we did? But I hear you saying it's still really the same because you're, but parents don't feel that way. They really feel like you teaching a whole nother way of math.
It's all about making sense of what's in front of you. Right. So we do provide additional resources, like I add notes online that we took in class, videos that they can watch. I teach them how to utilize their resources. Like, no, I don't want you to use Google to cheat, but use it to teach you if I'm not available. You know, YouTube.
I mean, we grew up in a time that was sort of like our teachers used to say, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket at all times. So now, like, so we had to like memorize our multiplication tables. We had to like memorize how to do the things. And now
I don't think they have to memorize that anymore.
I would like to, like, they don't have to memorize anything anymore. And I think that that's also different. I mean, memorization is definitely a skill, like, you know, that you know, rather, but I always say that I try to teach with an approach, sort of what Ms. Bryant was saying, that like how to utilize your resources to help you. So it's like, if you know, when I'm helping a kid, oftentimes I'll say, find this example in the notes before I'm going to say like, this is how you do it, or what's the first step, because, you know, try to teach it off of the model, like, because otherwise, like, what was I doing standing in front of the room teaching to begin with, if you're then just going to not use what, like, the resources that were even like given to you through notes and things like that. I think also with parents, I think there's still also the stigma of like, I wasn't good at math either. And there's things like that. And
see, I say I was good at math. I did say that at the beginning of this, but I said when I got to college, something changed. Yeah, I don't know. I think that, I mean, look, there's definitely a journey with it. I know that's for sure. Numbers, they become imaginary once you get to college. So, but it's, I think also the thing is that it's been a minute since parents have been in high school too. So it's like they aren't utilizing those. Like, it's not the same math, like real world math in terms of just like money management and things like that are not, or scheduling or whatever it is, your finances, it's not necessarily the same as solving for M and things like that. So they might feel a little bit out of practice too. And you know, you just said something that, and we're going to get back to the history piece, but I think this is so important. When you said like different, so checkbooks, like like our students, I don't think any young people know anything about the checkbook, and we would have to write it on the side and subtract, and like, where is that in math? Because it's gone, or is it?
It's gone.
But are we teaching them just to memorize? Like, if I have $1,000 in my account, I got to remember I used $300, so I got $700 left. Or
now they have mobile apps.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Where
it's
you could just sign on and it tells you.
And it
what's
tells you.
available.
But sometimes that
But
money
you-
hasn't cleared yet. That's why
That's
I'm
true.
always like,
But it'll still show as pending.
Right.
Like,
But then
they'll
it-
still subtract that money. So it's not made to be a part of like the available balance.
Right.
And it also goes back to, again, like, it is bigger than solving for M, solving for X, doing this, that, whatever. It's about the critical thinking. It's about the problem solving. You're exercising these muscles in your brain, especially in high school when doing math, that you're not getting other places. And especially with these kids, like in today's age with TikTok, social media, everything else, you have these parts of your brain that are trying to develop and trying to grow. And you're doing that in math. Yes, you're not going to be solving for X. You're not going to be doing that stuff the rest of your life. We understand that. Like, we are adults as well.
Well, I have to argue against that.
Right.
Because they do. They just do it unconsciously.
Exactly,
Right.
but that's
So
what I'm
you
saying.
planning a trip.
It's
you
the problem
going to
solving.
the grocery store. If I'm seeking a better sale, I'm doing
Right.
math.
Right.
But I always challenge my students because I always say there's not anything that you do in life, and they will tell me anything. I mean, even I had a student like, what about tying your shoe? It's a sequence, it's a pattern, it's shapes, it's whether, you know what I mean? Like it's all of that. So like at some point you can just apply a math concept to literally anything. And I say that to get them out of the thought process of like, I'm not good at it, because it's like, can you tie your shoe? You just did math. That is a pattern. That is it's like, it's just anything like that. It's a tactile pattern that you're doing, right? It's also like an action that you're needing to do. But I try to just show them that, like, you are capable of implementing math. We talk a lot about schedules and things like that. It's a pattern.
okay,
So
I got a good math that we
okay.
used to do. And Miss Bryant's probably going to be like, oh, yeah. Do you remember before we had GPS, we used to open up these long maps? You don't know this? Seriously?
I got
But
math.
we would open
I
up
had
these
math
big
quests.
maps.
I had
Oh
math
my God,
quests.
no! Before we had map
I
quests,
know, the books, yeah,
we
that
would
you
open
had
up
to-
these
they
maps,
could never
and
be
then
full.
you would like measure and say that's these many miles to get to this many miles, and that's how you would figure out where you were going.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So when I think about that, I'm like, that was math. I think like technology is great, but then I'm like, they don't have to think about like the math to figure out. And you would have these. They used to
Right.
sell them, right?
Yeah.
You would stop
At the
at
gas
like
station or
a
whatever,
gas
yeah.
station, and they would have all these different maps, and they were open, like
Yeah.
almost a wall, and you would have to sit there and map out where you were going.
I mean, I sail, or
Damn,
I
that
have
made me
sailed
sound
before.
old.
But well, no, but when I moved to Chicago, I moved to Chicago 16 years ago now, or so, I guess. And my mom and I, we drove from Maryland to Chicago, and we printed the directions in MapQuest. However, we also had like a map that I was open, and I'm like, okay, like this is the route we have to take, and
I
that
don't know if they sell those
I
anymore. but
doubt
that would
they
be
do.
Nice to bring,
And
so I
then-
could be like, see,
Oh, they
Yeah, I
definitely
would like
do.
to see it.
Yeah. I also, when you go
I'm gonna look for
sailing,
one.
they still use charts. They're called charts in sailing, not maps, but charts. They still use the charts, and they still use, I mean, obviously technology is updated. They have like electronic compasses and things like that where you're not needing to like graph but they still use the charts because, water, there's not much
Yeah.
of like a
Yeah.
land base to like measure distance. But that's all done in degree measurement and things like that. So, I mean, it's like just everything that you do in life, it involves
It's
math.
just so much has changed, and your class did on some mathematicians.
Oh,
which
yeah.
I
So
thought
I made
was
them
really interesting.
research.
Because in that I kept saying, oh, we put that person in math, because in some cases they did so much that kind of bled over to other places. And I even think about the one movie that became, what was it?
Hidden Figures.
Hidden Figures, yeah.
That it became really big and maybe inspired women to want to do it and stuff. But do you guys feel like more women, because you were in the math classes in education,
And there were not many of
that's
us.
what I was going to say. Do you think it was a lot, or do you think it's gotten bigger now, or?
It's hard to say because I graduated and never
Yeah,
really looked back.
Right. That part.
But it definitely wasn't easy.
Yeah.
And actually, I was called in because the program that I went to, it was known on campus that it wasn't easy to get through. About a year before I graduated, the director of the department actually called me in and tried to talk me into changing my major.
Really?
And I'm like, nothing's wrong with my GPA.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm handling this really well. Like, why are you trying to get me to change my major?
So you still feel like it's a male dominant?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, well, it's interesting because, I mean, in elementary school, I had like all female teachers. It wasn't until like I was in middle and high school that I started to even have male teachers. But I had, my favorite math teacher was a female teacher. And I think, say what you want to say about it, I think she was a little bit more empathetic towards me than my male teachers were. But I think that it's, you know, if you're thinking about history, it's just the roles that, you know, were allowed and allotted. I mean, look, a woman was not allowed to get a loan until by herself without her husband, and even up until like 86, I think it was. So like that in itself is like, you know, you think about banking and you think about these math careers that like you couldn't even independently do that as a woman. So I think that part of it is just sort of the restriction of it. I think that they're missing out, because I think that I mean they say that if you're talking psychology, they say that there's like a different type of a logic brain in women than in men. It just how, like, you know, if you're just gender neutralizing it, like so I think that in some ways, like there could be different aspects and elements of having a different type of a brain teach it. I know for me, like when I had a male teacher, it just felt very like straightforward. There wasn't really the opportunity to like adapt and change and figure out a different way to explain it. I felt like my female math teacher, Miss Snow, I can shout her out. I can still remember she got so excited one day when we were doing proofs in geometry, and she got so excited that like we got it, that she was jumping up and down. It's like, that was in, you know, 10th grade. So it's like, that's a memory for me, and many years ago. And so it's just that, it's like, she was so excited about math that like, it just fed into like, you know, the classroom.
But even touching back on that history piece, it's not that women were not in the math and science fields. They just didn't receive the recognition.
Right. That
even
part
if you
too.
look at the history of NASA, it was women doing those calculations.
Right.
They just never got the credit.
Yeah.
And never got the, you know, they never got recognized or acknowledged for the work that they actually contributed.
And like businessmen had the secretaries at the time, and the secretaries were the one doing all of the filing and paperwork and keeping track of the finances. Like they were able to, you know, it was sort of like they would call the female secretary and say like, what was this budget, this? And it's like they were the ones calculating and they knew it. I mean, it's like, I know you were talking about Hidden Figures, but like Mad Men just being on the business side, like that show is a great example of just sort of, you know, women stepping into a different role and sort of the shift in that happening. Yeah, it's just the opportunities weren't necessarily available. I'm grateful
That's
that
why
they
I
are
think
today.
this is so cool, because there were women that stood up and said, hey, we are doing this. Hey, we can do this, right? Because think about it, if nobody had said it, we would still be back where we're like, oh yeah, men know the numbers, men are the smarter ones, things like that. But it took women to do that. And so I guess the question I want to kind of throw to you guys is like, how do you, like, do you sometimes look at some of your students and be like, you could be our next female whatever in math?
All
and
the time.
Oh
All the
yeah,
time.
literally
All the
constantly.
like, what words, or how do you, because I'm sure they don't always see it though, do they?
No.
Yeah.
I have this like vivid memory of shout out one of our just recent graduates from last year, Hainisha Malone, like standing up in front of my class, and she like was catching on to every single thing so quick, and the rest of her peers were some of them were kind of struggling, some of them were getting it a little bit, but I'd be like, okay, Hainisha, like, do you want to go and do, and she's like, yeah, okay, I think I'll stand up, and like I would call her Miss Malone, and I would let her lead the class, and she would just be in charge, and like she would go through and tell everybody and ask the questions that I would ask, because at a certain point, like if they're really paying attention, they see what we're doing, and they like know like kind of some of the movements, some of the motions, and she thrived, and it was great, and it was amazing, and those were like the best classes that I've ever had, and like the most genuine learning and understanding I have seen like across the board my students receive, because like not only was it one of their peers, but like she really was confident, and you could see that she wanted to do that and wanted to help and wanted to have that aspect of it. And so, I mean, I think it's just like one, starting with what we've all said, like with this baseline of like nobody is bad. You are not bad at math. You are never bad at math.
Right.
It's all about the way that you've learned. And then going from there and like letting them thrive when you see them doing it.
Yeah.
That's interesting because we push like teaching because we'll say we need more teachers, so become a teacher. We push different careers and jobs, but when we talk about teaching, we never say like be science or go for math or go for we just kind of say teaching,
Right.
And so that's always been like, how do you figure out what people should or how are we showing that? That's why I guess I asked that question because. I don't think people always know.
Whenever you're finding any type of career, it's always like people do always think about like what they're passionate about and what they're good at or what they feel confident in. And so it's like I didn't know that I could be a teacher, right? Mm-hmm. But like I knew that I can do math, right? And that's the thing. So I mean, I always wanted to be a teacher. I was one of those. My mom used to buy me like attendance books when I was younger as like birthday presents. Like that's what I like. I've always wanted to be a teacher, but. I never picked like a subject in the sense that, because for me, my direction was doing special education, but when it got to the point that I was doing math, I was just like, oh yeah, this is it. I just like it because I feel like math is a subject that you can really see the light bulbs go off. Like all of a sudden you've been working with a student on something and then like you can see like when it clicks and when their confidence kicks in. I don't think that I would ever say to somebody like, wow, you could be a math teacher. And it's interesting that you bring that up because I've never in my career like thought that. I'm like, yeah, be a scientist, go do something in the math field for sure. And it's just funny that I don't even think of being a math teacher as in the math field. It's just because it's in the teaching profession.
Right.
So
That's
it's
what
like,
made me say that because I've never heard anyone say. I've heard them say we advertising for teachers, but I never hear them say it's like certain contents is what I guess I would say. Ms. Bryant. You have been teaching the longest math, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have any students that are now math teachers? Or that are in the process of becoming a math teacher?
Well.
And I know because sometimes we don't know all of the students.
There have been a couple that's gone into education, but not necessarily to teach math. Okay.
Yeah, and I only asked that because I was going to say, like, how does that make you feel? Because that's what I think. Like when I see people that like are teaching that like I taught with, or they were my students. I'm always like,
although they didn't go into teaching, like I have some that have gone on to become nurses.
Well, that's a lot of math there.
Yeah,
right.
A couple went into education, but one is a paraprofessional and one teaches like preschool.
Okay.
So, but to see them grow, develop, start their own families, like every time they have a baby, I feel like I just had another grandchild. So it's like, my babies are having babies, but whoa, I'm getting, I'm really getting up there.
Yeah.
So, it's shocking. However, it's still like fulfilling at the same time because I was a part of that.
Yeah.
Right.
And they'll shout you out on Facebook. Like, I love when I get tagged in a post.
Yeah.
Like, tag your favorite teacher. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
I don't like when I get tagged because they usually have my picture next to it or something. I'm like, where'd you find that picture of me as a teacher? That type of thing. Let me just throw out this question and we'll be wrapping up soon. But as you think about like women in history, women in math, and paving a way, how do we continue to push that like, because there are some young ladies that will probably have been in some of the classes that you guys have been in and been like, it's too many men. I'm not. And not because they're afraid of it, but it could be, I'll use myself when I decided to stop teaching and go into counseling. As I was in counseling class, I was the only guy, in a whole cohort for like the whole 2 years. No matter what class we took, I was the only guy. And it was interesting because the teacher could never remember my name. And I was like,
You're like,
yeah.
Because I think it was just
out.
weird because it was all these females that, and of course when we would talk about counseling, they talked more nurturing and everything else. It was just really weird for me that I like did 2 years and I was the only guy in the cohort. And so when I see like guys now, like Mr. Dean and people that get in there decide, can I come do some of my the following, the hours and all that, I'm always like, yes, man, come on, yes, you know, because I know what it felt like, you know, I knew what it felt like to be the only guy.
Right.
So, like, I guess I'm saying to you guys, like, what do you, like, if somebody's sitting and saying, I should be a math teacher, or I should do that, like, what are some words, or what?
I mean, once your mind is fixed, it's fixed.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to pursue something, you got to stick to it because nobody can do it for you.
Yeah.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Like my young ladies, or even my young men that struggle, like you only get better at tasks that you practice. Like if I don't put in any effort, of course I'm not gonna get better.
Right.
I think like representation just kind of matters. Like if it's like, as you said, like we have a pretty dominant female math department. I don't know what other schools are like, but I think just sort of seeing like, oh yeah, like you've done this, I can do this too. And then just sort of the verbiage, I don't think like, I mean, I know that we have to help some of our students put their feet on the ground in terms of their goals, but in terms of just like being realistic about it. But I've never like stopped a kid from like dreaming big, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's part of what it is. It's like if they have a passion and an interest, it's like how do we navigate it that it will still like meet their needs and abilities and what they practice at and what they're good at. And so I think that the more that they can just hear, like, you know, it's even just saying like, wow, like you could be a math teacher, like, wow, you could teach this now, like even just saying that, putting a student in front of the classroom, I mean, that just gives them like,
because I think that's how we'll grow more teachers. I think that, and someone said it, that sometimes, like, we don't even promote our own profession. But we know we're short, you know, and it's not because we hate it or whatever. It's just, I just don't think that we've ever been like, you should be a teacher. Have you thought about teaching? You know, so.
Yeah. I feel like I agree like both ways. Like I think that's just like our job as educators in general, and especially like within the math realm, is like, as we've said from jump, like you giving them the space where like you're telling them you can do this. You walked in at the beginning of this year and you said, no, I hate this, I don't know how to do any of this, I've never known how to do math. And you show them again and again and again and again, once you put your mind to it, you do this yourself, you can do it. Like, look at what you've done. Look at what you've achieved. You didn't think you could do this at the beginning of the year. I am someone who is telling you, sitting in front of your face, that has watched you grow and develop as a human, telling you as long as you put your mind to it, you can do it. And I think that going forward into those like fields and stuff, as long as we continue to give students even that little like seed of confidence that they can enter some of these spaces where they're the only girl or they're the only guy or they're the only whatever, and they believe fully and completely that they deserve to take up that space, and they are confident enough in themselves that even if I walk into this space and make a mistake, I'm going to grow and I'm going to continue to do better.
Yeah, that makes sense too. I like that. So in our last part, this is why I'm going to put you guys on the spot. Okay, here we go. In we got like 3 minutes, so we got to wrap it real quick. But in these 3 minutes, think of one time, and it doesn't have to be a long story, but one time where you were doing your teaching and you really looked at yourself and said, I got this. I'm right where I'm supposed to be. Because sometimes we really go day to day and be like, I'm hoping I'm making a difference. I hope it's doing. So just one time where you was like, I did this, and I was like, yep. They responded. I knew this was where I was supposed to be.
I got my story.
Okay.
My freshman year of college, when we were put into the classroom first semester freshman year, and I was working in a special ed class in a middle school grade in 8th grade, and there was a student that the teacher said to me, he will not do math, he won't, you know. And I sat down and I like worked with him one day, and I found out that he was really into basketball. I played basketball in high school and all that, so we kind of got talking like that. And it was to the point that like we worked with him, he kind of did it, but the next time that I went back, he approached me and said, I'm ready to do math. And from that moment on,
You was like, yeah.
like I'm done. And so like I was happy for the experience, because then I knew that I was in the right major and I wasn't going to be wasting my time. So honestly, it happened very early in my career, because it was like pre-career. It was during my education for it. And that was sort of solidified it for me.
Okay. You guys both are like, I have so many.
Mine actually happened year 10.
Wow.
So I was in the game 10 years before I was like, yeah, I can see myself doing this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Right.
So for the first 10 years, I only taught Algebra 1.
Yeah.
So how hard is Algebra 1? But the first time I was presented with a true challenge, I was at Orr High School and had to teach pre-calculus to a group of seniors who, lacked a lot of foundational skills, but by the end of the year, we were rocking it. Like, we were doing trig and the tangent circle, and I'm just like, I've never taught this much material. But to see, to start from the bottom and
There you are.
to
Started from the bottom, now we're here.
hello.
That's when you look back and say, I got this.
Yeah.
This my jush.
Yeah.
Well, then the next year I transferred here.
Yeah.
Took out
Then did the whole curriculum.
Right.
So
I had a student 2 years ago who struggled all throughout the year just with everything from like mental health stuff to school stuff and everything else. And I just got a text from them like a month ago and said, hey, call me when you can. I have some life updates that I'm really proud of and I want you to know.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is it. Like,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
more could I ask for than to be this person that when you like have something that you're like, oh my gosh, like this is so great, I need to tell Miss Meyer. Like,
Yeah.
I need to let her know
Yeah.
she'd be so proud of
Powerful.
me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the only thing I hate, I can never remember all their names. But
Yeah.
I'll never.
Oh my God, I know.
I know.
I get so upset. I said, hey, Miss Green, and I'm like, hey, baby.
Now you just gave it away, so if they listen, they're gonna be like, she know who I was.
Dang.
They call me baby.
Sorry.
You gotta be like Sugar
Cut
Plum.
that part
and-
out.
Sweetheart.
Right. I usually say, what year did you graduate? And when they tell me the year, I can kind of figure out like who they were with, and then it kind of clicks
But
to
that's
me.
Yeah.
the thing. I
Connecting
know
the
the
dots.
year I taught them, what
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
I just can never remember
Yeah.
the name.
Me too. I'm the same way. I'm really
Yeah,
bad with names.
that's and when you do it for so long, you do. Yeah. So real quick, I'm gonna end it, but I wanted now. This is another Miss Bryant. Please don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about on this one. One of the things that was math that really helped me is the South Side uses numbers, the West Side uses words for our streets.
Yeah.
But what happens is we knew how to equate the name with the
a
street
particular
number.
right? Because our city is built on a grid.
Right.
And I was about 7 when my uncle taught me this. But yeah, like that's never been an issue with me because I knew Cicero was 48. I knew
Yeah.
Austin was 60. So when he was teaching me, he was like, okay, Madison is 0, State is 0.
Yeah.
Even before I had any knowledge of
And you could
the
never get
coordinate
lost.
plane. Right. But also as you travel, you pay attention. So as I'm coming west, I'm memorizing Pulaski, Keystone, Colorado,
Yeah.
Ketteville,
And you
Keeler.
say I'm in K-Town, so these
Right.
numbers, and so a lot of that is math. That's why I was like, that's one of so the map, and then that for West Side. I think when you live on the West Side, you learn math a lot quicker because of your streets and your numbers.
Well, yeah.
But
I mean, when I teach like the coordinate plane, I'll say to the kids like, you know, because you have to meet the X and the Y, right? So it's
Yeah.
like I'll say to them like, meet me on Harrison, and then I'll say like, where did you meet me? And I was like, but that's not where I was. So you have to say like, meet me on Harrison and Laramie, and then you know that that's like the corner that you're meeting. So
Yeah.
it's just funny like you try to put it into real world situations. I'm just like, okay, where is this coordinate meeting? The corner of what? And like that's the way I say it,
Yeah.
even though it's not like a corner, but they connect to it because that's the way that their brains are speaking to each other. And throughout that, so it's definitely you can learn. I mean, look, apply it to anything.
Because that's
in
how I
math,
learned to, if I
anything
did
in
a
math.
mile, like I'll be like, okay, from Laramie to Central is not a mile.
Right.
You know, I needed more. So that was the bell. It's time for us to go to work. So thank you guys so much. I do appreciate you guys. Thank you for
Thank
being a part of Women
Absolutely.
History.
This is fun. I'll do it
Yeah.
again.
And
Yeah.
come on out and do it again. Thank you guys.
Thank you.